Hello, everyone. This is Matt Schlapp, and welcome to another great episode of CPAC Live. As you know, we started this show because with the outbreak of Chinese corona, so many of us are on lockdown in our homes, which I think we're all antsy and itchy about getting back into the world and getting back to work because America needs to get back to work. Unfortunately, I live in the Commonwealth of Virginia with a not too all-star governor who seems intent on never letting us get back to work. But we're coming at you because we all felt the need in the CPAC community to have a place where we can all talk with each other and figure out what's really going on. Now, this show is an extra special show, and we're so glad you joined us. And as you know, you can join us on Twitter, you can join us on Facebook, and you can join us by just simply going to our website at conservative.org and clicking on the link. When you do that, we'll be sure to give you push notifications on your phone to remind you of future shows and to tell you it's still Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. But why do I say it's a special show today? Well, first of all, we can spike the ball a little bit because our last guest in our last show was Mike Garcia, the Republican candidate from this important special election in California. The AP hasn't called it officially, but Donald Trump has called it, and so have most people who understand the numbers in California. He has a big lead, and it looks insurmountable for the Democrats. So Mike Garcia will now be a congressman. And why is this significant? Well, Hillary Clinton won this district by over 50%, and now the Republican, in the personification of Mike Garcia, has taken this district. This is a very good sign for the 31 Democrats who hold positions in Congress in districts won by Donald Trump. So you won't read very much about this because Mike won. If he had lost, we all would have read about it. We know how that works. But the reason why this is extra special, beyond spiking the ball, is there's a different way in which we're celebrating, and that is the reconstitution of the state of Israel, which happened 72 years ago tomorrow. And we know this was punctuated, the special relationship between America and the state of Israel, by Donald Trump's keeping yet another promise, and that is relocating America's embassy in the city of Jerusalem. And we have two really special guests with us to talk about this because they know this issue. It's knitted in their hearts, and I know they want to talk to our CPAC community about what this relationship means and what the importance of the state of Israel means just historically and from a religious standpoint and from a culture standpoint. We have Julie Strauss Levin. Welcome, Julie. Julie is a lawyer, and more importantly than that, she's a wonderful conservative voice who we, I would say collaborate with on very important things. We're really honored to have you with us, Julie. And Ze'ev Orenstein, who's with the City of David Foundation, who they're both Americans. Ze'ev is residing in Israel and has really played a critical role in some of these most recent discoveries. And so let's kick this off by first asking Julie, did you go to Jerusalem for the dedication of the embassy?
I did, and that was 2 years ago tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And I'll tell you, Matt, it was like a surreal experience because in 1995, the United States Congress passed a law saying we recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and we're going to move our embassy there. That didn't happen. It didn't happen through many, many presidents, and it took Donald Trump to say, no, I'm going to recognize what's historically and ancestrally accurate, and I'm actually going to move the embassy. And Ambassador Friedman said, okay, great, we're going to do it in several months, and it's going to be on May 14, 2018. And so I was there with some members of my family, and it was so humbling to sit there and to look over the hills of Jerusalem and see that our embassy is where it should be, in the capital, in the undivided capital of Jerusalem.
Ze'ev, you are residing in the state of Israel. What is the feeling on the ground amongst Israelis about the Donald Trump presidency?
I can tell you that it is significantly different feeling than the one that existed a few years ago before this administration. I think
you can say his name. It's okay. You can say his name. I'll say it. President Obama.
So the feeling during the Obama administration was that the United States was looking to build alliances with other countries in the region, such as Iran, at the expense of some of the United States' more traditional allies in the region, and certainly Israel among them. And over the last, I guess, 3+ years, the feeling has been that this is an administration that sees the value of the alliance together with Israel, but not just from a strategic military perspective, but also from a values perspective, from the perspective that the foundations of both of our countries are rooted in the same traditions and same heritage and same principles that in many ways have their roots in Jerusalem.
That's right. So I want to go back to you on that question, Julie, but I also want to tell everybody who's watching that we're going to show a really important scene with Ambassador David Friedman from Jerusalem, which you're going to want to watch. It's never before seen video of some of the things that are going on over there with these archaeological discoveries. We're also going to have Congressman Lee Zeldin on to answer some of your questions. But Julie, back to this question about this affinity or the knitting up between the state of Israel and the United States of America. That's more than just our constitutional principles. It's deeper, right?
It is deeper, but before I answer you, if I may, just to give our viewers sort of an understanding, this feeling that we don't have here, but that when you walk the streets of Israel, no matter what city I've been in, people come up to me and they thank me for our President Trump. I mean, could you imagine that in the United States of America, where there is such disdain for our amazing president? And I do think he's our amazing president. And I also think he's the best friend that Israel has had, both as a president and personally. I know he loves the Jewish people. I'm telling you, for a moment to get back, when I went to the embassy opening, and Ze'ev can talk to this too, you saw huge posters lining major streets all over Jerusalem where the Israeli people thanked President Trump, thanked him for the embassy, just this overwhelming sense of we love America and we love your president. And it's just such a feeling that is missing here. And I think our people, everybody who's listening here, who's obviously conservative, is starving for that sort of recognition that our president just doesn't get on a daily basis. So I just want to point that out. Yeah.
Let me jump in on that, which is we went to 5 countries around the globe, or had 5 international CPACs last year, and everywhere from Brazil to Australia. We went to Hong Kong, went to South Korea, we went to Japan. And what the dynamic we found, which I think you're echoing with Israelis, is that this kind of CNN constant noise of how America is being ridiculed because the people internationally hate our president. When you actually go to the countries, you realize the countries have the same splits that we have here in this country, which is actually there's a huge percentage, probably even a majority in these countries, that are looking at Donald Trump and rooting him on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you don't think Israel is praying and going to make sure that its people vote, the Americans who are there, who are able to vote for Donald Trump, they are, because a presidency that is not a President Trump presidency come November 4th is disastrous for our country, and it's also disastrous for Israel.
Ze'ev, jump in.
I was going to tell you, in light of the conversation about the embassy move to Jerusalem, Jerusalem is a place that has no shortage of heritage sites going back thousands of years for Jews, for Christians. And one of the things that's amazing about the United States Embassy in Jerusalem is you see every single day, whether it's local Israelis or tourists from all over the world, the tour buses now, they stop in front of the embassy and people get off the bus and they go and stand in front of the plaque of the dedication of the embassy with President Trump's name on it, Ambassador Friedman's name on it, and they stop and they stand and they take pictures. It is very rare in modern times to have a new building become a pilgrimage site, but that is what the United States Embassy in Jerusalem has become for people from all over the world. I think it has spiritual significance. I think also, as Julie was alluding to, the fact that it showed the world that the United States is going to not just say, but also do. And it's an amazing thing. And to put it also into context, I learned from someone in the military that generally there is no other United States embassy in the world where people are allowed to go in front of the embassy and take pictures for security reasons. The exception exists only with the United States Embassy in Jerusalem, where there is a protocol to allow people to come next to the plaque to dedicate the embassy and take pictures there, because the United States recognizes what this embassy represents for literally billions of people around the world who have a deep affinity for what Jerusalem represents. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, an amazing thing. So let's go into this question about the anniversary tomorrow, the State of Israel. Dan Schneider and the rest of the ACU team was fortunate to travel to Jerusalem, to travel to Israel, and really talk with so many people on the ground, as you know, Ze'ev. And we want to have a future CPAC Jerusalem, and we're hopeful that will come to be. But let's ask this question to you, Julie. 72 years ago tomorrow, Israel started or was reestablished, I should say. How did it start out in terms of the relationship with America?
Well, let me just digress a minute, because as we talked about, Israel is the ancestral home of the Jewish people. 3,000 years ago, God made a covenant with Abraham. In Genesis, we read this, and he said, I'm giving the land of Israel to the Jewish people. And ever since then, after a little respite of peace, the Jews were expelled from their homeland, and there was a constant pull for centuries and centuries. And finally, we all know the history. We don't even have the time to go through all the expulsions and the returns and the Holocaust and so forth. So 72 years ago, David Ben-Gurion stood before the people and gave an Independence Day speech that talked about this, and talked about the return, and talked about the fact that Jews strove from generation to generation to return back to this land. And he talked about the rebirth of the country of Israel because of its ancestral heritage. And the United States was the first country, President Truman, 11 minutes after David Ben-Gurion gave his speech, and as we know, David Ben-Gurion went on to be the first prime minister of Israel. 11 minutes later, the United States voted in support of this. And the United States voted at the UN for the partition in November 1947. Right after that happened, the Arab states said, we're never going to let that happen. We're going to push the Jews to the sea. But the United States stood with Israel. And ever since, the United States, in one form or another, has stood for it with Israel. And as I said before, it's President Trump who has been the most steadfast. But President Truman and many other presidents since then have been strong supporters of Israel.
Well, let me just jump in there, because what I would say, I'm the Gentile in this conversation, but there used to be a bipartisan consensus in America about understanding the important allegiance with the State of Israel, and it went well beyond Jewish communities in America. It was widely held, and that's been shattered. And Obama and Biden really helped to shatter that, where the Democratic Party seems much more hostile, and the Iran nuclear deal, punctuated that.
So look, our country is based on Judeo-Christian values. We see this in the Declaration of Independence. We know our founders looked to the Bible when they wrote the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the word happiness, they all appear in the Old Testament. They all appear in the Bible. Our country is based on Judeo-Christian values. And for many of us, I'm sure every person who's watching or listening today covets that document, the Declaration of Independence. Our Liberty Bell has a quote from Leviticus right on the Liberty Bell itself. And you're right, Matt. The goal of the left is to push religion and faith out of the town square, the public square, because if you do that, if you don't have belief in a creator, belief in something bigger than you, which was really the whole basis for the Declaration, then who do you turn to? You turn to government, and that's literally the playbook of the left.
I agree. I also think when you remove religion, it's amazing how truth seems to be a victim as well. But Zev, the other thing that I think is interesting, we learned our takeaway from our ACU trip to Jerusalem is, a lot of conservatives were worried the state of Israel started on a path to socialism 72 years ago. But under Netanyahu and other leaders, they seem to be embracing this idea of freer markets and flatter and lower taxes. Do we have that right?
Yeah, Israel is a country that is very ingenuitive, and it's, I would say, in part because of necessity. We're a country that historically has been in a very difficult neighborhood with billions of people who don't really want us to be living in our ancestral homeland. We don't have the blessing of some of the natural resources that our neighbors have. And that's forced us to come up with very creative solutions because there would be no other way for us to survive and thrive in the way that we have here. And we've been very fortunate to be blessed today with the freedom to be able to lead and innovate and create.
Right.
And
so
it's been a
Zev,
blessing.
What's really interesting about that is you turn now to this outbreak of Chinese corona. First of all, it seems like Israel handled the outbreak very responsibly. But second of all, we're reading so much about the medical innovations that could be emanating from the state of Israel. I don't know if we would have thought we could say that 72 years ago.
It's an amazing thing, whether it's the medical innovations, the technological advancements, and the Bible talks about Israel being a blessing to the world, and in many ways that's what's happening, because the innovations that are coming out of Israel, it's not just for our benefit, but we very much believe that whatever comes out of Israel should really be a blessing to the whole world, and that's what we strive to do every day here.
Do you, Julie, back to this philosophical question about the underpinnings of the American creation and how it relates to what the Bible teaches and demonstrates about the state of Israel. What do you think that is it the problem that we're not teaching these types of truths in our school system? How come so many people in America have lost touch with this?
Unfortunately, I think the playbook of the left has been to a large extent successful. Many years ago, we know that Dewey had the idea, let's go in the school system, and from a young age, children are taught, teachers are on the left, they are taught to not love our country. And if you don't love our country, that means you don't love Judeo-Christian values, because the two are intertwined. So the left was very smart. They got into the schools at a young age, and they have been teaching generation and generation of our children. First, they concentrated on higher education. I think we all agree they pretty much have that mastered. I don't think there's many conservative, if not even-minded, forget left or right, just objective professors on campuses. And now the left has moved K to 12. And this is a real problem that we have to talk about, because if you don't, education is everything. And if you teach the left mantra day in and day out, then they're going to poison the minds of our children. How do they know about Judeo-Christian values? How do they know about the Bible? How do they know that our rights are created and given to us by God and not by some government, local, state, or goodness knows the federal government? They don't.
Julie, we've seen this. You know what the indicator is to us at CPAC is we've noticed over the last 5 years that it was always 50% or more were college kids. But another dynamic we're having is a lot more high school kids and 8th graders are drawn to the CPAC conference, which is this largest conservative conference in the world every year. And they're coming. And initially we thought, oh, that's great. Kids are really getting into learning about the foundation of their country and the Constitution. But no, they're coming because they see the radicalization in their schools. And so it's really, we can see the outgrowth of that. But I want to go to ask Zev a quick question as I want to set up this video a little bit. Why is it important for people who are being taught not true history, right? Or even in some countries, denying the fact that there was a Holocaust, denying the fact of these biblical truths? Why is it important for the modern person of today to know about the historical discoveries they're finding in the city of David?
I think it's very simple. The roots of both of our countries are rooted, as Julie mentioned, as you mentioned, in the Judeo-Christian heritage, which has its roots in the Bible, in Jerusalem. And many people who believe in that heritage today are coming under assault that you are just Bible believers, but you're not grounded in science or in reality. And what's happening in a place like the city of David, the place where Jerusalem began, is every day archaeologists are unearthing antiquities that allow a person to not only believe, but to know, not simply as a matter of faith, but as a matter of fact, the connection of Jews and Christians going back to Jerusalem thousands of years, to the heritage of the Bible being true, and one that has continued to influence and inspire Western civilization as we know it. And so you have on the one hand, whether it's the Palestinian leadership or the United Nations, who is trying to erase that heritage. And when you think of the two most hated countries in the world today, it's not Iran and North Korea. For many, it's Israel and the United States. And I believe the reason for that is because it's the last two countries who still believe in that heritage, and they're under assault. And being able to show that it's grounded in reality, I think, is something very powerful to use in making our case.
So we're going to be joined. Yeah, just Julie, we're going to be joined by Ambassador David Friedman. Feel free to jump in here and also tell us why his role is so important.
Was that well, I just wanted to jump in for a moment and say,
please.
I had the privilege of walking on that pilgrimage road. And I will tell you, you're speechless. You're speechless because you know millions of Jews and Christians walk that pilgrimage road. That's where Jesus walked. It's unbelievable. I'm having a hard time even articulating it. It is so humbling because you know this is where our ancestors, Jews and Christian alike, went to the pilgrimage from the Pool of Siloam up to the temple 3 times a year, and it is such an amazing, I think, transformative and life-changing experience. I don't mean to sound like a member of the Israeli Tourist Board here, but I certainly encourage everybody to make sure that they go to Israel, because I promise you that you will feel a changed person. It's an intangible feeling, it's an emotional feeling, it's a spiritual feeling, but you will, for sure.
Yeah. Let me weave in this whole idea of this ecumenical message, this Judeo-Christian message, which is every night the CPAC community is participating in 2 rosaries. And as Catholics and Christians who are watching know, that one of the mysteries is the finding of Jesus in the temple. So when you talk about the road and you talk about the reality of how important that was to the Jewish people to actually go to the temple, this is something that really all Christians venerate those memories, and they understand how important that was also for the Christian faith. So I want to encourage everybody who's watching, if you want more information about both the Protestant prayer sessions we're having, and if you want to participate in the Catholic prayer sessions, it's over 50 days of these sessions. And you know what is on all of our hearts every day is praying for people who are committed to freedom. And that means you're praying for America. And there's nothing maudlin about loving your country so much that you want to pray for it. And I also feel like when I see leaders like Netanyahu around the globe, I want to pray for them too, because I feel like the globe's in a critical position. And we want to thank each of you for joining us on CPAC Live. I think we're getting more and more of the kinks out of creating this web show. We're getting great feedback from everyone. And I think this discussion, we're going to need to have more of them, Ze'ev and Julie, because this relationship between these countries and its people have to continue. And so we're going to now bring you Ambassador David Friedman for Never Seen Before video about this pilgrimage road that Julie Strauss Levin just discussed. So watch the video, and we'll be right back at you with Lee Zeldin right afterwards.
Both worlds. Preserve the modern, uncover the ancient. So when we left the Pool of Siloam, the question was, how did the millions of pilgrims 2,000 years ago get from the Pool of Siloam all the way up to the Temple Mount? We are walking, standing right now on the answer. We are standing right now on the 2,000-year-old pilgrimage road. This is the road that our ancestors, all of ours as Jews, but Jews and Christians 2,000 years ago, this is the road that our ancestors would have walked on when they went on pilgrimage from the Pool of Siloam up to the temple on the Temple Mount. Not a road near here, not stones that look like these. This road, these very stones. Modern Jerusalem, the modern neighborhood of the city of David, is about 60 feet above our heads, with Jewish families, Muslim families living above us, day-to-day normal life in Jerusalem. If somebody has a religious message, a political message, an ethical message they want to preach, where are they going to do it? They're going to go where the people are. This is where the people are. So you would have someone 2,000 years ago get up here on top of this platform, this podium, and it's important to point out, all of this 2,000 years ago is under the sky. This is not underground 2,000 years ago. So you're outside, you stand up here, and if you're interesting, people are going to stop and listen to what you have to say, and if not, the next guy will get up and give it a go. Now, I was asked not long ago by a senator in D.C. He says, what are the chances that Jesus was here? That he walked on this road, that perhaps stood up on...
I know the answer.
Yeah, what's the answer?
100%.
There you go. That's what I said. I said, Senator, I don't want to tell you stories. Let me give you a conservative estimate. The likelihood that he walked on this road 2,000 years ago, 100%.
But you were delivering a message of truth, which is what this is all about. I know you carry something with you to deliver that message of truth.
I've always felt, and I got this from my father, who was an extraordinary person and a great rabbi. And my guess is that his forefathers probably stood on one of these podiums and preached thousands of years ago. But what I got from him was the centrality of Jerusalem, not just to the Jewish people, and not just to the Christian faith, but to the modern world, to the values that are essential to modern civilization.
Welcome back, everyone, to CPAC Live. What a great and inspirational video that was, and what a great conversation we had with Ze'ev and Julie Strauss Levin about the important relationship between the state of Israel and the United States of America. And we're honored to be joined by one of two Jewish Republicans in the House of Representatives, Congressman Lee Zeldin. Lee, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Matt. Thank you.
And it's also great to have our mighty comms director, Ian Walters, who's going to take over and ask you some important questions on this topic from our CPAC community.
Congressman, thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule today. Our first question is a video submission from our friend Jeff Dunitz.
Hey folks, my name is Jeff Dunitz. I am a conservative blogger and a pro-Israel advocate, along with being a freelance journalist. My question is this. Pro-Israel organizations have a policy of not showing favoritism from either the Democrats or the Republicans. Anyway, how do we convince the pro-Israel organizations that it's ridiculous not to show favoritism, because really only one...
What do you think?
That's a great question, and I believe that one of the best ways for there to be strong bipartisan support of Israel is for both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to both be 100% strongly in favor of strengthening that relationship between the United States and our greatest ally of Israel. I would not advocate if support in the Democratic Party went from 100% to 60% or 40%, whatever that number is. I wouldn't tell the Republican Party that the Republican Party should go down to 60% support or 40% support to balance it out. No, instead, you should be encouraging people to strengthen that relationship, to value it, look at this great beacon of freedom and liberty in that dark region of the world, and help to make it even stronger. I would also say this, the word of the use, friend, some people call others a friend, but they're not actually a friend. And I've seen that a lot with these pro-Israel issues where a member of Congress will be called a friend of Israel. But if that member wasn't there when President Obama was signing off on the Iran nuclear deal, strongly in opposition of that fatally flawed deal, if that member of Congress isn't there in the chamber when Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu is coming to speak to address a joint session of Congress, as he once did, if you're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism in our country and you don't have members strongly speaking out in favor of it or calling out those in their own party like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, or those who embrace them and promote causes like Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory from the Women's March, or Louis Farrakhan. The measure of the word friend, I think we need to raise our standards and hold our true friends to at least a minimum standard, and not call someone who's not going to be there for us in tough times, giving them any more credit than they're due. That would be a big mistake to continue.
Congressman, earlier this year, President Trump issued an order recognizing the Golan Heights to be part of Israel as our official U.S. policy. What effect does that have for the future security of Israel and our U.S. foreign relations posture internationally? Do we expect some of our friends to follow the U.S. lead in this recognition?
We're seeing that. We saw it with recognizing the embassy in Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. A lot of the moves that President Trump has made, you have seen other countries following suit afterwards. And to understand how important the Golan Heights is to Israel, you can't put it into words to the same extent of just standing there on that terrain where you're looking down into Syria, where you can look to Lebanon, you can look back to Israel, and you realize that it is terrain that can only be used for a defensive posture. And Israel is the nation that looks to use that territory for defensive purposes only. But if that was Syria, for example, you would see the likes of terrorist groups or al-Assad and others looking to use that terrain to launch it for offensive purposes to Israel. So I believe it was an important, bold move by this president. And I believe that just like we saw with the embassy and the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, hopefully we'll see other countries following suit in the recognition of Golan Heights as part of Israel's sovereign territory.
Here's one that's come in over the email about President Trump. Are the accusations that have been levied against Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel as salacious and baseless as a lot of the accusations that have been manufactured against President Trump?
As far as the accusations against President Trump, the list, as you know, is at this point way too deep. It's thousands of different angles that they try to they have been going after since the day he was elected for getting elected. They've been going after him since his inauguration for being inaugurated. And they're just trying to whip up any hoax and other excuse to try to take him down. So the accusations in the United States are coming thousandfold from all angles, where in Israel they've consolidated behind a much smaller amount of theories, and it's a case that the prime minister in Israel has to deal with. It's still not yet behind him. The accusations there are serious, but I really can't compare what's going on in Israel to what's going on here in the United States, because I have seen President Trump's opposition all day, every single day, going after him from every angle. And oftentimes it's just pure fantasy without even a hint of truth. In other cases, they'll take something like the July 25th call transcript with the president's call with Zelensky and try to turn that into a fairy tale impeachment parody to try to impeach a sitting president. So it's been really wacky here in the U.S. I can't compare it to anything I've seen in our country's history or any other country.
We've got another video question from our friend and influencer, Grizzly Joe. Grizzly Joe asks, Israel has been fighting for its very existence since day one. How does Israel achieve a peaceful coexistence with the Palestinian peoples when the Palestinian leadership says that it is their religious duty to push Israel into the city?
First off, Israel has to be in a position to defend itself. We should be recognizing Israel's inherent right to self-defense. We must understand that a nation without borders is no nation at all. That's important for us here in the United States and important for Israel there. So while they face these existential threats from all around, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, it's even the leadership of the Palestinian Authority and others, it's really important and most fundamental that Israel is able to defend itself through this. Hamas's charter originally said that you can't, they called jihad an obligation. They said that you can't negotiate with Israel, that any Palestinian who negotiates with an Israeli is not a true Palestinian. So this isn't just an accusation that's not backed up with facts. This is actually in the Hamas charter. So as far as timing goes, if you want to negotiate a long-term permanent peace deal with anyone, if it's any country anywhere on the planet, you have to have a willing partner on the other side if you're trying to reach a peace deal and agreement that both sides sign. And the fact is, right now, in 2020, they don't have someone on the other side of that table who's willing to sign in good faith. And even if they were willing to sign in good faith, they're not able to deliver their people. So in the meantime, Israel needs to defend itself.
Lee Zeldin, you're a wonderful voice in the United States Congress. We appreciate especially the work you did from your perch on the O&I Subcommittee of Foreign Affairs. You were a bright light and a strong voice against the cronyism of that phony impeachment and phony Russian collusion. So thank you for all you do. We're really excited and pleased with the feedback we're getting on CPAC Live. Next show, Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have the great Sarah Carter with us to give us the latest on the document dump that's been occurring thanks to the great leadership of the president and Rick Grinnell and others, where we're actually getting some sunshine. And the truth really will set us free. And the truth will make you realize that we have been right for 4 or 5 years on this whole ridiculousness of trying to have a coup perpetrated against our president. So go to conservative.org. Keep watching the show. Keep giving us your feedback. Lee Zeldin, keep up the great work in Congress. We'll see you Friday.